excited to be here. So let's see if I can figure out, I'm going to share my desktop. So very excited to be here to talk about, let me hide some things, solve your search quality issues by putting relevance at the center of Blacklight. I'm gonna, if it's okay with you all, if everybody can see, I'm not gonna go to present mode because when I do that, sometimes my other tabs get difficult to get to. So, and I'll share this deck around. So before I start, I'm kind of maybe the outlier person in this audience because while I'm library sciences curious, I don't actually have any recent activity with library sciences, but so my name is Eric Pugh. I'm one of the co-founders of Open Source Connections, and we're a relevancy consultancy, very much focused on helping build better, stronger search teams with great search results. And I recently, a couple of months ago, became a Solr committer. 4,998 days after my very first patch was submitted to Solr. So most of my adult life has been involved in, I'm realizing, with Solr. And I want to put out a big shout out to Mr. Hatcher. Eric, I think I saw you here earlier. Eric Hatcher's actually been a critical person in my career. He was the first person to introduce me to the whole concept of open source software. And he was the person who said, Eric, as a software developer, if you want to change the world, the way to do it is through open source software. And I've taken that message to heart. Later on, he said, hey, you should look at this Lucene and Solr thing I've been learning. This is back in the early 2000s. And out of that, I got involved in Solr, I co-authored the first book on Solr. And back in 2008, I had to go back and look in our blog to figure this out. I did a project with the UVA library, working on sort of a fork of Blacklight that was called Blacklight DL. And there I went ahead and put some screenshots of it. So been around for a long time. Today, I'm really focused on building better measurement strategies and working with different search teams. So yeah, super excited to be here. And I think the reason that I'm here is because you'll see later, I needed a web interface I needed to make up a mock e-commerce web store. And I reached for my favorite, I need a quick website built on Solr, Project Blacklight, and it worked really well. And I kind of ended up re-engaging a little bit with the community back in sort of the April, May timeframe. And it's been great to see this community sort of thrive. So, all right, please speak up as you have any questions. This time is your time, right, on conference, law of 2 feet and all that. So, please holler with any questions. So, relevance, what does that mean? So relevance is the idea that the search engine is taking in typically very unstructured queries and intuiting from what the user is typing in what they're looking for. And relevance is a really hard thing in sort of a lot of the use cases that Blacklight is used for, because everybody has different goals when they're typing in searches. Maybe they're looking for a very specific document. Maybe they're looking for a survey of all the material around a topic, right? It can be a real challenge. And yet we're expected, with not a lot of resources, to return amazingly accurate results. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. So first off, I wanted to throw up this quick framework for how I think about relevancy. And in relevancy, I think about two different areas. I think about the offline or laboratory environment. And this is where we're thinking about how can I improve search results, but without actually deploying changes to production. This is where I'm iterating and playing with things. Do I need to add some more synonyms? Do I, maybe we should be boosting more on title, or maybe we're favoring certain documents that everybody has looked at a lot and therefore they keep coming up at the top. Maybe click boosting is not the right thing. How can we get more diversity in our search results? So a lot of those problems, and I'm going to show you some specific tools that you could use with Blacklight today, are about having this offline environment where I can safely play with my queries and really get to understand how can I interact with them. And then once you feel like you've got some working queries and things are looking good, well, okay, my theory is this is better, but do my users, do my students, professors, faculty, the public, are they actually embracing the improvements I've made to the search engine? We don't know until we give them an opportunity. And that's where A/B testing, and we kind of swing into this online environment. A/B testing becomes important, right? A/B testing is where I push out, I've got my old algorithm that's battle tested and good or bad is what everybody's used to. And now I have my new algorithm and I want to see if people like it and adopt it. And do they convert and look at more documents, give better feedback? And A/B testing is sort of this online environment, and I'm measuring that by collecting clicks and looking at user behavior and understanding conversions, and this sort of builds another wheel. And so we think of this offline environment as a very fast-moving, let me try out lots of ideas, a very quick area to experiment and play in. And then periodically, when we feel like we have a good idea, we kick it over to the larger one. So one of my colleagues, Charlie Hall, christened this as Project Penny Farthing because he thought it kind of looked like that, a penny farthing bicycle. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into show versus tell. And I'm going to go ahead and actually show some relevancy improvement. And I'm going to show it to you. So let me go ahead. So is this the most unusual use case of Project Blacklight any of you have ever seen? Have anyone else ever seen a e-commerce web store, a fake one admittedly, built on Project Blacklight? I was pretty happy. So the first, I was giving a presentation at Berlin Buzzwords, and we were demonstrating this stack of relevancy tools, and someone pointed out we needed a web UI, and with a conference in 2 weeks, I was like, what am I gonna do? And fortunately, Blacklight worked out great for me. So here is my very common, right, should look like any e-commerce site. So let's go ahead and do a search for notebooks. And as you can see, right, this looks like our standard e-commerce site. We have products with brands and when they were released and, pricing. Blacklight, great. We've got some brands. You could sort by brands. We could look at different types of products. We could even go in here and look at colors, all sort of the things that you might expect in an e-commerce website. So Blacklight solved my problems. But one of the things is looking at this query for notebook, we all can tell these aren't very good search results, right? If I'm searching on an e-commerce website and I type in notebook, this is not there's what I might expect, right? Now we're finally seeing some actual notebooks. Let's go ahead and look at laptops. Thinking, a little bit of thinking. Oh, that's a laptop. Oh no, that's actually just a screen protector for a laptop. And these are cable locks and lots of laptop adjacent products. And so this isn't very good search, right? We just looking at this can understand that it's not very good. So let's see if we can't do a little bit of improvement. Let me see if I can play with my tabs here. So one of the, I'm going to show you a web interface called SMUI, the Search Management UI. And it is a powerful tool that didn't really exist in the open source world, but has existed with commercial search engines like Endeca and others for many years, that allows you to do what we call active search management. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Notebook over here. So I'm going to go ahead and try and improve this query. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in Notebook, and I'm going to use, as the person who understands and created the index, I'm going to go ahead and use my knowledge that we have a facet called product type. And I know that I can boost on products, notebooks. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And what's nice is we're finally getting to a point where we can, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and push that change to production right now. And a lot of people call this, like in the e-commerce world, you call it searchandising is sort of the portmanteau we use. I would call it, in library sciences, in the world that Blacklight normally lives in, active search management, right? I'm actively improving the search results. So let's go ahead and see if that was improved. I'm going to swap to my algorithm. Quirky is the underlying library behind SMUI, kind of like Lucene is underneath Solr. And let's go ahead and do a search. Let's see if we get better notebook search results. Hey, what do we think? Right? That's a great, the first two results are great. Somehow this Easy Riser laptop kind of snuck in third, but we got some more notebooks. Third result, laptop cooling stand, still pretty bad. Let's see if we can't turn up the juice, turn the knob to the right. Let's really boost on notebook. I'm going to go ahead and save it. I'm going to push my changes to production. And wonderful, right? You see that we kind of turned up the juice on this match, and we're improving. We're active search management. We're solving the problem right here. Now, we remember our friend laptop we weren't particularly impressed with, right? Oop, lap. Of course, I have to spell it properly. Not very good. Well, one thing that we know is that a laptop is a notebook, right? In an electronic website, a notebook is not a piece of paper, it's a laptop. So why don't we go in here? We'll throw in a synonym. I'm going to go ahead and save that in there. Yep. Go ahead and push my configuration to production. All right, let's see what we get back for laptop. Terrific, right? What we would expect. Notebook, laptop are now both synonyms for you. So now, feel free to throw up a reaction or raise your hand if you fought with synonyms.txt or the managed synonyms resource APIs and tried to do the same thing. I suggest that SMUI and Quirky was a lot simpler. So we have an intuition that we've improved search, right? We have an intuition. But one of the things that we're all trying to do is move to a more data-driven approach. We want to be able to measure change. We might want to report back to our stakeholders or our users, hey, we have a new algorithm and it's given us this much more improvement. Well, how can we do that? Well, I'm going to bring up another tool called Cupid. And this is an open source project that I'm one of the stewards of. And Cupid is sort of a play on showing your query some love, right? So trying to be cute here. And the idea behind Cupid is that we're able to actually measure our search quality. So I've gone ahead and created a case called Chorus Electronics, and I've added our two queries that we don't like, laptop and notebook. And you notice there's a score next to them. What I've done already is I've gone through and scored all of these products on a 0 to 3 basis. So a 3 would be like perfect, like I've got the best search result. You exactly understood what I was looking for. Good is sort of, yeah, that makes sense, right? Those products all make sense. Fair is vaguely, yeah, fair. Like I understand why these products are matching laptop. I see the word laptop. And then poor might be this product is actively making me angry, right? Like these are bad results. So that's our rating scheme that we're using. And I've gone ahead and rated the first 10 results already. Now, what this rating does, it gives us a number. It gives us some data. We get to move from a qualitative measurement of how good search is to a quantitative measurement of how good search is. So here we go. And so we've already run and scored, and our average score is this 4.23. Let's go ahead and see how good our search results are against our other algorithm, our quirky based algorithm. So ampersand query type equals quirky. And all I'm doing here is interacting with the same Solr that Blacklight, my Blacklight front end, is also interacting with. Go ahead and rerun my searches. And, right, we would anticipate, let me close that. The documents on the left for laptop ought to match, right? HP Compact, right? First 2 compacts, then an EliteBook, they're matching. And we've gone through and we've said, yeah, for the query laptop, these are all great, perfect. We've said perfect, right? These are perfect results. And so we've gotten a very high score. And for notebooks, likewise, perfect score. And so you can see that our score has jumped up from our prior 4 point whatever up to a 31.8. So now we have some numbers that back up our intuition that we've improved search results. And in the future, as we manipulate our queries, we can come back here and say, all right, maybe we've got 100 different queries listed here. And over time, we add additional factors, whether it's sort of the active search management through SMUI and Quirky and creating more rules, or maybe we're just changing the underlying Solr configuration. Either way, we're able to come back here and measure and see what our scores are doing. So, questions on this? Cool, great. So,
Eric, sorry,
yeah, please.
There were a few questions in the chat.
Oh, I did not look.
If you want to read through some of them.
Sure. Thank you very much. All right, let me see. All right, so scrolling back, and there's quite a few questions in here. So what is the product that we're looking at with the GUI for search rules? So I'm going to show a little bit more in my slides, but that would be the search management UI. And these are all open source projects available to you. I'll drop the link in on, but yeah, it's, it's been around for a couple of years and primarily used in the people behind it are primarily focused on the e-commerce market. And so it's sort of over in that little world. But in terms of a tool for actively improving your search, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, it's available here. So Huda Khan asked about, is it fair at UI for updating Solr config fits particular relevance conditions? In this particular example with using Cupid and tweaking things in search management, we happen to be pointed to a local Solr, but it can be wherever you want. So, actual configuration changes. That's a great question. And I'll show you guys a little more in the slides, but I do want to show e-commerce files. So the way SMUI and the underlying library Quirky talk to each other is we write out this rules.txt file, and I'll show some examples, but it's a sort of a very simple syntax. You actually don't need to use SMUI. You can just write your own rules file and place it here, reload Solr, and it loads it. So it uses a pretty simple language syntax like that. So SMUI, though, makes it a lot more approachable by a non-technical person. And a lot of what we're trying to do in relevancy is trying to put like active search management out in the hands of the people who really understand what the users are trying to do. So yes, Bill, you asked a question about managed schema. I'm going to come back to that. Yeah, so why don't I kind of continue on and then come back? I love these questions. Thank you, everyone. It's really great. So let me continue on, and then maybe that'll answer a couple questions. And if not, we'll bring them up. So I wanted to give you just sort of a brief demo, because I wanted to whet your appetite for, hey, we actually can improve relevancy pretty easily. The tools are out there. So if I was in present mode, this would be animated. But these are the, there's an open source project, that's what I'm demonstrating right now, that demonstrates all of these tools working together. Project Blacklight is my, obviously, web front end. I just showed you rules.txt, which is what Quirky brings to the party, the actual query rewriting that it does. SMUI is the user interface for working with Quirky so that you don't have to, mess around with this somewhat arcane syntax. Cupid is a wonderful tool for having a conversation with your end users and collecting judgments and ratings and sort of putting a number on how good your quality is. And I didn't demo it today, but there's a wonderful project called Rated Ranking Evaluator that is really meant for running kind of those measurements that I showed on Cupid, but on like thousands and thousands of queries versus sort of hundreds of queries, the way Cupid is optimized. So I will paste a link to this Chorus project. You can git clone and run a quickstart.sh command and see what I was showing. So I do want to take a moment and make a case to all of you about the value of active search management with Quirky. And specifically, I want to show you a little bit of what's possible with Quirky, because that may help you understand that, hey, I'm having these problems. This is a tool that maybe I should be looking at and adopting. Both Quirky and SMUI are not part of the Apache Software Foundation. They're independent projects, but very closely related. So Quirky has been around for Solr for 6 years, and so it's grown and battle tested, recently migrated to Elasticsearch. It's licensed under the same Apache 2 license that we know and love, so very easy to use. And there's 2 links to go learn more about it. This should look familiar to any of you who've mucked around in a Solr config.xml. This is how we're adding this new query parser, right? You notice that when I was in Cupid and I wanted to send to use a different query parser than the default one, I did Qt query type equals Quirky, right? And that ran, and then that was configured to run this Quirky, and there's my rules.txt. And Quirky has a number of what they call rewriters, and I'll show you some other ones that are used for solving various problems with understanding different types of queries. What we call the common rules rewriter is all about supporting synonyms. And I would suggest that the way I showed you how we could do synonyms was really nice. We can also do boosting and penalizing. So I boosted on product type notebook, but you remember when laptop was showing all of those cable locks? I could have negative boosted on cable locks and gotten them out of notebooks. I can apply filtering rules and I can delete common terms. And let me give you some examples. So these are some examples. So we saw, right, personal computer is a synonym for PC. So that's a very common use case. What about, we can even do fancy things like I want to make wall whatever have a space. So there's an example where wall mount would actually match wall space mount. So if you're not sure, you can do some patterns there. Here's a great example of boosting. So if I get a query for iPhone, well, I'm going to boost up by 200, right? That's just a factor. The word Apple. So I'm going to look for products that have Apple in it. And I'm going to boost down, and here you can see we're doing both a penalizing. What I'm saying is don't show category, any products that have the category accessories. So if I'm searching for iPhone, I don't want to get iPhone cases, iPhone earbuds, and all the rest. I just want the phone itself. But, I've got some other tools that I could be using in my active search management. Why not filter, right? You type in iPhone, I'm going to add a filter to match product records, documents that have the word Apple in them. And I'm going to take out documents that have the word case in them. So I don't get any iPhone cases, just iPhones. Or even I can manipulate queries like this. I think the intuition on this one is there's no such thing as a cheap iPhone. So let's just get rid of the word cheap, because that's not helping the person find, we're not going to find good iPhone products. So, so that's the common rules. And then for those who really want to get into the Lucene hacking, we can actually write really complex rules. So if I get a query like new, right? What am I going to show? Like, oh, I guess if you type in new, you want to see the newest products. So here in this example, I'm actually going to eliminate the new token, and I'm going to add an up boost on products that have been released in the last few days, right? So that's a pretty interesting option. Or what about special offer, right? Again, I'm going to get rid of those two tokens. I'm going to look for all products. And in this schema, we're saying if you have a strike price, that means you're a special offer. So let's go ahead and filter to just products that have this special price. And notice all this complex logic, all this sort of Lucene function. We can go ahead and use it right here. This stuff here is not exposed through SMUI and is definitely, getting pretty advanced, but is available to people. So there's that. And I think that the case that I'm making to people, one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you all, is that if you've been fighting synonyms.txt, or maybe you've been trying to use the Elevate component, elevate.xml, the query elevation component, maybe you should be looking at these tools as much easier and more robust tools for doing search. Lastly, and I'll get back to questions, there's a couple of other rewriters. So there's a replace rewriter that does a great job for spell checking, right? Often people misspell things the same way. In e-commerce, it's much more a narrow set of spelling variation than maybe in what your use cases are, but we can do that. One of the things I'll got a slide about is the number unit rewriter. where we're actually able to take a query like laptop 15 double quotes and explode that out into a query that says, show me all the laptops with a screen size of 13.5 to 16.5. Like I can have some fuzziness, some fudging, and recognize that that number, 15 double quotes, shows up a lot in my screen size attribute and just automatically explode that. Dealing with shingling, right? iPhone, iSpace phone, or iPhone. And then this word break rewriter is new. And one that I've seen a lot is searches where you have two words that sometimes are spaced apart or not. So topsoil, top space soil, or one word, topsoil. So it deals with some of those patterns. And lastly, you can write your own rewriters. So here's sort of just a little bit more detail on the number unit rewriter. And it's literally looking at these text, looking at a field and noticing, oh, we have lots of documents that have a 16 in them. It shows a whole bunch. So let's go ahead and implicitly bring that in. And here is a screenshot from one of the big users of Quirky, and I think they funded writing this number unit rewriter. But you can see that this is a query there in Germany, and they have a query with numbers, and you can see they're actually matching, right? A price of 1,000 euro. We did a range query and returned products that were sort of close to 1,000 euros. We looked for a screen size of 16 inches, and you can see there are 3 laptops that are in the 16-inch range. The bottom one is 15.6 inches. This kind of fuzziness here is super powerful for improving search quality. This is the word break compound rewriter that I mentioned before, right? And breaks up these kinds of words. Again, can solve a whole class of relevancy problems that we might have, and very easily to use. And we're starting to expand it out to being more specific to different languages and how they handle word breaks. So that's sort of just a quick deep dive, and I'm going to come back to questions. So today, this is that framework. And back in July, I was thinking about what exists out there. And this offline environment is relatively baked. We have a number of open source projects that I encourage you to look at. Cupid, RRE, AgentQ, these are all different open source projects to do sort of automated testing and evaluation your offline environment. This Nothing Good is a link to a survey of open source A/B testing tools, which I really haven't found a compelling solution. And out here, we haven't really done much around. So where next for Blacklight and relevance? I realized earlier today, this was my opportunity to speak to the community and make a case for how would it be easier for me as a relevancy practitioner to improve the quality of search in Blacklight. And I came up with a couple of thoughts. The first one is the more that we can put our algorithm and relevancy and ranking logic inside the search engine, inside of Solr, and not in our Rails front end layer, the easier it is for us to point other tools like Cupid and RRE at our search engine and get the same search results. There were definitely features of Blacklight that I wanted to take advantage of, but then I realized I would have to recreate those parameters inside of Cupid. And so, I want the relevancy logic to live inside of the search engine, and the display and controller and model view and all of that to live in Blacklight. I also think that Solr has come a long way since 2008 with its APIs and how to work with it. Blacklight still has that very strong, like, I'm going to edit a solar config.xml file, right? And a schema.xml, and stand it up, and Blacklight's going to interact with it. And I think that if we can start using some of the newer APIs that are inside of Solar, for example, config sets makes it really easy for me just to zip up all my configuration and just post it through an API to Solar. I don't have to log in. I don't have to think about Solar Home and Solar Data Dir and all those other weird parameters, right? If I'm using Solar Cloud, config sets makes it really easy for me to create a whole new collection. The schema API and manage, I think someone mentioned this earlier, the manage schema makes it really easy for me to add a new field. I need a new field. If I'm working on relevancy, one of the beauty of using a search engine like Solar is I can just go create a new field, add a copy field, add a new field. Let's build fields that help us solve what our users are looking for. It's not a relational database. We don't have to preserve third normal form. Let's create fields as we need them, but we need to make that easier. And the schema API is the way. Param sets is something that isn't well known, and maybe someone could drop in a link to the Solar Ref Guide. But what param sets lets you do is set a whole bunch of parameters and give them a name and register them with Solar, right? Algorithm B or algorithm A. And then at query time, I can just say in my query, ampersand use params and the list of different parameters I want to use. And you can mix and match and have a whole bunch of parameter sets and combine them at query time. And what that does is open the door to potentially easier A/B testing. Again, we're not hard coding all of the relevancy logic in my solar config.xml, and we're able to play with things. And then lastly, I would love to see more tickets opened for both Quirky and Cupid on, how, things that you're experiencing when you're optimizing Blacklight applications. We're building this community. So, so the kind of the wrap up slide, right, is Quirky.org is an open source project independent from, say, Solar or anything else, and it has a number of these relevancy projects underneath it. The demo that I showed you is Chorus, which is sort of the idea. It's a stack of components, nominally for e-commerce search, but honestly for any kind of search. And how I kind of discovered rediscovered the Blacklight community was when I was working on this project. So we're going to be pushing out more sort of relevancy related topics and tools there. And then lastly, you may, at this point, I'm sure you're looking for yet another Slack community to join. There's a relevancy Slack, and there's a link for an invite that, has over 1,000 other people who are all interested in relevancy, and I would love to have you come and join. So that was me, and yeah, would love to work through some of these questions. Kelly, what's the best way to sort of respond to these questions? Do you want to say them and I'll respond?
Yeah, if that's what you'd like me to do, I'm happy.
Perfect. That way you can keep track of it.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to go from the bottom up maybe because.
Great.
So Huda asks, does this handle multi-word synonym mapping? Mapping in one direction from a single word to multi-word seems doable, but if you have multiple words on both ends of a synonym equivalence, that requires.
It does. That's one of the things that, is that Quirky is a query rewriter. So it's kind of manipulating the queries outside of, and then they eventually go to Solar and go to whatever query processor you normally use. So it's working outside of that, and it's not constrained by like the whole fields, like what all the fields are, right? It can work one layer above that. And it does do multi-word synonym mapping. And I sort of feel like the state of synonyms in Solr today is kind of a mess, right? And the more you're doing multi-word synonyms, the more of a mess and the more edge cases that you hit. And fundamentally, a synonym, when you say something's a synonym, you're saying this is equal to this. And it's got, but we tend to use synonyms to say this is related to this. And there's no sense of how related or not related it is. And I think Quirky offers a lot of tools around that. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, it handles multi-word synonym mapping.
And I'll just remind folks that you can unmute yourself to ask questions directly, but I'm not sure if we covered this one. Can you set a more general ranking adjustment? Say query term matches product type name all around?
Yeah, so you can definitely do those sorts of patterns, right? Those sorts of patterns. But honestly, I guess where I wonder on that, the more general your use case is, then you might just want to go back and, you're all familiar with Dismax and eDismax. And maybe at that point, you're better off putting that broad, like match everything and do this in that layer as well. They're two different knobs. And I wish I could give you like a hard and fast rule when to reach to either knob. What I will say is I often use Quirky to tune things, sort of that real time, get them out, solve the problem. And after a while, I didn't show, but you can track changes to your rules and put comments in there. And if you discover that you've written like 20, 30, 40 rules, they all kind of do the same thing. Notebook, filter to product type, notebook, right? Laptop, filter to product type. If you notice you're writing the same style of rule over and over, what that suggests is maybe now we ought to go look at our underlying Solr algorithm, which is a little more cumbersome, and maybe look at query fields and our boosting and that, and work at that layer.
And Jonathan, you asked a question about if it was a standard Solr synonyms file, but was that answered in the chats? Okay.
Yeah, it's not, right? Rules file. And the thing is, we know that there's a user, Quirky, who actually has a database of relationships, concepts. And they spit out a rules file with like 15,000 rules, right? Machine generated out of this database table. Works great, right? So yeah, it's not that Solr synonyms.txt. And I guess I should say, if you do have Solr synonyms.txt, those will still kick in once the query runs, which if you're literally making synonyms is maybe a good thing.
I'm not seeing any other questions, but maybe I'll give folks a minute or two more just to type anything in or ask directly.
So, so one of the things that does often come up is when people are looking at search results and you get like a short one word, sort of very conceptual search result. And it's like, you look at Cupid and you're like, oh, well, I got 3,000, if I go on a library site and type in book, I'm going to get back 10,000 results. And one thing is, when you're trying to do relevancy optimization, if you're getting back hundreds of results, the manual rating and ranking of Cupid is really efficient and effective and makes a lot of sense. But if people are typing in very broad-based queries that return tons of results, what that suggests is that they're kind of not sure what they're looking for. And maybe instead of trying to return individual results, you should be returning categories or other ways of navigating your data set, because they need a diversity of different results to understand, oh, this is what I'm looking for. And it's that next query that maybe you want to start trying to figure out the right answer. So Eben asked, yeah, that's a general question for the group. How are you tracking user query terms, Google Analytics or other tools? I'm honestly very curious as well, because, the online area and having a set of click tracking and those types of tools, where to start. I'm curious what everybody is using as well. My gut feeling, it's Google Analytics. Is there something else, a challenger to Google Analytics? Oh, awesome. So we got Matomo. Is Matomo the old PWiki? Awesome. Yes, it is. Confirmed. So great.
If you start making changes on your relevancy for specific searches, is there a way to keep track of how overall this might be changing the overall searches?
Yes. Well, great question, David. And I wish, I did not prep you for that question. So every time I have a relevance problem, I'll go into Cupid and create a case, because if I can't come up with a couple of queries that demonstrate the problem, I probably don't really understand the problem well enough to try and go solve it. So I'll go ahead and create a case with a couple of queries and I'll work on it. But the other thing I do like to do is have a case that I'll call baseline or survey or broad set of queries. And I'll try and come up with about 100 queries, 50 to 100 queries. I will grab a random set of my head queries, so the most common. I'll grab a random set of my long tail queries, right? The ones that don't show up very often. I'll grab a couple of queries that return 0 results, right? Go look at my analytics and understand what's returning 0 results. I'll go grab some of those. And I'll make a case and rate those. And I keep an eye on that, right? Because one of the things that we have to be careful in relevance tuning is that often we will try to we'll focus on the trees and not the forest, right? Especially if we're responding to somebody. We sometimes joke the HIPPO, which is an acronym for the highest paid person's opinion. And, we will take their query and focus on it and really do our best to make it the best possible results. But we're focusing on an individual tree and we're not keeping an eye on what is the impact on the forest. And so we do need to do that. One of the reasons that I like the active searchandising or active search management and the SMUI quirky combo is that it's fairly low risk when I say I'm fixing one type of query or a couple, I can do notebook star, I can do a couple patterns like that, but it's fairly low risk, it's fairly surgical. I'm not gonna mess my overall algorithm up. But if I'm mucking around with eDismax and phrase boosting and the rest, I really wanna understand what is the difference over my broad set. And and if I'm measuring it with Cupid, I can have a high degree of confidence that, I've actually improved search overall for everybody, or I've solved this one search problem and everybody else isn't going to have experience worse search.
I think that was all the questions, unless any other folks have any.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And, as I said, it was really great to kind of get re-embedded in this community 10 years, 12 years after I first experienced it. And I always point to the Blacklight community as a great example of a really successful open source consortium model. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. So we'll reconvene tomorrow at 11, but for now that wraps up the Blacklight Summit for today. So thank you all so much. And we'll be using the same Zoom link tomorrow.